Hello, everyone, and welcome to this installment of the Forage Month Webinar Series. I'm Brittney Goodrich. I'm an assistant professor and extension specialist in the Department of Agricultural Economics and Rural Sociology at Auburn University. I'm going to be talking today about the economics of warm season forages. Be sure to tune in on Thursday when Josh Elmore will be talking about grazing management. All right, so I really like this quote that I found in a textbook about beef production in the South, where a cattleman is basically in the grass business and livestock is a saleable byproduct. So we need to really take a whole systems approach to livestock production, and oftentimes we forget about forage because we take for granted that the grass is just going to be out there growing. And that's actually one of our primary advantages here in the South, is that we're able to grow grass easily. And so we really need to, think about forage production in this whole cattle production system, where we take into account economics, herd health, nutrition, and think about all of those when we're making our forage decisions. So we think about, in economics, we always talk about revenues and costs. And in forage economics, not all of the time are, the revenues as apparent. So if you do hay production and you sell your hay, then it's easy to think about the revenues that are coming in from that. But a lot of times we're grazing, and so the forage revenues come in to play with animal nutrition. So the decreased costs of purchased feed and really the weight gain of the animals. So then we also have costs of that forage production. A big one for perennial pastures is this establishment costs, where we're seeding or sprigging and having to spend a lot of time establishing the pasture. But we also have to think about annual maintenance costs every year. So we need to be fertilizing and doing weed control to make sure that our pastures are efficiently feeding our livestock. So I thought it was best to put together just a thought experiment, because sometimes it's hard to think about a pasture in terms of money. So assume you have, a herd of 50 brood cows, and they're going to eat 20 pounds of forage per day. So we can calculate that out at a price of about $80 a ton for hay. That purchase feed cost for those 50 brood cows is going to be $40 a day. So if you can graze for 270 days a year, that saves you about $11,000 in purchase feed costs. So that's about the amount that you can invest into your pasture development and still be, profitable, still be just as well off. So, and then another way to look at it is, if you have an annual pasture cost of about $150 per acre and you're producing 4 tons of forage there, that is costing you about $38 per ton. So we can subtract that $38 per ton from that purchase feed cost, and for those 270 days, the grazing over purchasing saves you around $5,600. So this gives you an idea of how important forage can be for your profitability. So maintaining those pastures is an efficient way to feed your cattle. And this figure comes from the USDA cow-calf costs and returns for the Southeast. And it shows you that, purchase feed and homegrown or pasture feed is a pretty significant portion of the total cow-calf costs. Now, I will point out that in this figure, you can see that giant part of the pie, which is unpaid labor. And so I want to point out here that the cost of your time is important to consider. So typically with your cash costs, when you think about cash costs of cow-calf production, your feed costs are going to be about 40 to 60%. But then there is that large portion of unpaid labor in there as well. And so the feed costs are also going to be even larger in stocker operations if that's your production practice that you use. So forage programs, when we think about that, you know, it's standing forages that are harvested by the cattle are often the most efficient and cost-effective way to feed them. So, and this is, you know, not always possible depending on growing conditions. But Alabama producers have a competitive advantage in grass production compared to other areas in the US, and that leads to a competitive advantage in beef production. So we have those long growing seasons and a variety of forages, and most of the time abundant moisture. So an efficient forage production or efficient forage program can really have a significant impact on your bottom line. So you need to know your costs of production, and that means all of your costs of production, not just from the forage program, so that you can properly evaluate your forage program regularly. So when we talk about forage program evaluation, these are the sorts of questions we want to answer. So how much does my forage program cost per acre? How many animals can, you know, 1 acre in this pasture carry? Should I adjust some of my inputs, maybe fertilizer, so that I can get a higher yield and feed additional, or maybe adjust it down and feed fewer animals per acre? And what does it cost per pound to produce a calf? So answering these questions can really help you out in the long run to be more profitable. So I want to highlight that regular maintenance is really key to profitability. So your pastures, you're converting these nutrients into nutrients for the livestock. So every time you take livestock off of that pasture, they're carrying nutrients from the soils. And if you're doing hay production, it takes off even more of these nutrients. So it's really important to fertilize and keep your pasture's value ongoing into the future. So economists like to say we have to spend money to make money. So it's really important for you to, you know, maintain that future value of your pasture. So where does a producer begin when we're evaluating our forage program? So one of the ways, basically a starting point for you is to look at enterprise budgets for the different forages and for cow-calf production. So we have on the Alabama Cooperative Extension website, we actually post updated budgets every year for cow-calf production, for summer forages, winter forages, so that you can use these as a baseline to evaluate your forage program. And so these budgets include variable costs, which a variable cost changes along with your production. So this would be, you know, fertilizer or feed and cow-calf production. And then also they consider your fixed costs, which are going to be there whether or not you produce any output. So these are things such as, you know, land payments and those pasture establishment costs that are going to be there even if you're not producing cattle. So before I look at some of these forage enterprise budgets, I want to highlight that enterprise budgets are used as primarily guidelines. So they're estimates, they're guides for planning in the future. And for our the budgets that we do for Alabama, we use recommended management practices to establish costs. So these are oftentimes better than average. So these may be higher cost practices than what you use in your operation. But it's important to make sure that enterprise budgets are reasonable. And so in ours, we provide them in spreadsheets so that you can actually download the spreadsheet and fill in costs that would reflect costs in your operation. Now, it's also important to highlight what enterprise budgets are not. So they're not perfect, they're not exact. You have to be flexible when you're using these. They're used for planning in the future, and sometimes things change. They don't always apply to every situation. They're not to be used, you know, as a production or a how-to guide. So you should really be looking for other resources for your production practices. And they're not anything for it to advise you on your taxes. So this is a look at our 2018 Bermudagrass establishment costs. So these are per acre costs. And you can see that, you know, we have, these are the establishment costs. So we have the sprigging costs in there, which is the largest per acre cost. And then we also have, you know, the fertilizer, lime, herbicides, labor, and equipment costs that are involved. So total for 2018, we had the per acre cost of about $370 for establishment of Bermudagrass. And again, I'll highlight that this would be different for your operation. So you can see the items highlighted in blue are things that can be changed to reflect your operation. So you can put in different fertilizer prices, different sprigging costs, that sort of thing, and get a better estimate for your specific operation. Now, $370 sounds like a fairly large, you know, cost. However, we have to keep in mind that that this is going to be a perennial pasture that's going to last for a while. So what we do is we take that total establishment cost and we prorate it over a useful life of 10 years. So you can see highlighted in blue, that's where that establishment cost is. We've divided it by 10 and you get about a $37 per year prorated establishment cost. It's in your fixed costs. So then we also have in the annual maintenance, we have fertilizer. Again, like I said, it's important to replace those nutrients and to get higher yields as well. And so you have lime and herbicides again. So total we have about $200 an acre for annual maintenance. And again, this could be higher than what is in your operation, or it could be lower. So those give you sort of a guideline of what it would be to establish Bermudagrass as a perennial pasture and what it would be to maintain it going forward. And so then this also shows you inputs for our cow-calf budgets that relate to pasture information. So you can, our budgets give you flexibility to adjust to represent your specific forage program. So you can see at the top, you can input your pasture information. So anything for your summer grass pastures, your winter pastures, you can put in the number of acres you have in each and the cost per acre to maintain them for the year. And also below you can put in your purchase feed information. So how many days you're going to be feeding purchase feed, how many head, to give you an idea about your purchase feed. So it takes these values and puts them directly into the cow-calf budget. So, you know, these are very helpful tools for producers to utilize when they're, you know, making forage decisions, planning for the future. So you can really evaluate which forage or forages, I should say, are best for your operation, so that these could be pasture or field specific. So we have a variety of different warm season forage budgets available. So Bermudagrass, Bahia grass, Dallas grass, summer annuals, and we have them available for establishment costs, haying costs, and grazing costs at the link that's down there. So be sure to check those out if you're making decisions about you know, summer forages. So Dr. Kim Molinex and Dr. Leanne Dillard have put together these great resources to show when forage is growing and what the growing season looks like for a variety of annual and perennial forages in different regions. So you can utilize these. I'm only showing the summer grasses, but you can look, and there's also, you know, cool season grasses as well to show you sort of what the growing season looks like and how to plan for your forage operation. And so, you know, this talk is about comparing or about warm season grasses, so I wanted to put in a little bit of comparison of some of these warm season perennials. So the main thing in here, if we're comparing Bahia grass and Bermuda grass, is that Bahia grass is really, I mean, just more resilient to lower maintenance. So you have lower establishment costs, you know, on average, and lower maintenance costs. You're using less fertilizer. So you can just get away with not putting a ton of maintenance into Bahia grass. On the other hand, Bermuda grass, if it's maintained and managed correctly, you can get higher production, so higher yields and higher quality forage out of Bermuda grass. But again, you have to put in more, you know, time and management into that. So, and this shows you another comparison. This chart is from a University of Georgia Extension publication, and it's really comparing, you know, Bahia grass and Bermuda grass in terms of what the outputs are. So you can see that Bahia grass typically has a lower forage quality, and Bermuda grass can have a higher forage quality. But again, you have to put in that increased management to get that higher quality. And then it shows you the different carrying capacities of the different forages. So you can see that Bahia grass has a lower, often a lower carrying capacity. So the number of animal units per acre that can be supported by an acre of Bahia grass compared with an acre of Bermuda grass. So proper maintenance of Bermuda grass can be beneficial in terms of getting that higher quality forage and being able to support more animals per acre. Okay, so one useful tool that I really wanted to highlight for some of these, you know, evaluating your forage systems or comparing different warm season forages is partial budgeting. So this partial budgeting can be used to compare different alternatives. And the idea is that it's pretty simple. You're listing changes in revenues and costs for a change in production practice. So I put together an example here, and again, this will be different for your operation. I'm using the numbers from our Alabama budgets. But for example, say that you're considering converting a pasture that you've typically grown summer annuals in for haying, and you're thinking about converting it into a perennial pasture of Bermuda grass for hay production. So this is what the partial budget form looks like. So you have increased costs and decreased revenue on the left side. So those are, you know, the bad things. And then increased revenue and decreased costs on the right side. And so if we're thinking about this example where we would go from summer annuals to Bermuda grass for haying, the first thing that we think about is fertilizer. So the Bermuda grass would likely cost more because it requires more fertilizer. So you'd be putting more fertilizer on, and that would be a higher cost for you. Labor, there would likely be more labor involved with Bermuda grass and maintaining it every year. So we would see an increased cost for labor there. And then we also have to think about that big establishment cost for Bermuda grass, where you would have this you know, approximately $370 cost in the first year, but that would be prorated over the 10 years of useful life. So that would be an increased cost for you. So your total increased cost from this transition from summer annual haying to Bermuda grass haying would be about $150. So in terms of increased revenue, we'd have higher hay production, most likely from the Bermuda grass. So we'd move from about 3.5 tons per acre of the summer annuals at $100 per ton to about 6 tons per acre at, say, $120 per ton. So we have a total increased revenue that we're expecting of about $370 per acre. So then we also since we're establishing Bermuda grass in the first year, we wouldn't have that annual seed cost that we're currently paying for the summer annual. So we'd be decreasing our cost by about $35 per acre in terms of that seed cost that we wouldn't have every year. So in total, this looks like a pretty good transition of, in net, we'd be better off by about $256 per acre. So you'd want to choose Bermuda grass over the summer annuals. Now, again, I want to stress these are from the Alabama ACES budgets, so it would be different for your operation. So I'm not saying, you know, everyone should go out and establish Bermuda grass. But this is just an example for you to think about how you could evaluate some of your forage acreage and making decisions. So you could also use this in terms of, if I apply more nitrogen, it'll be a higher cost, but I'll maybe get more forage production per acre. So you could think about it that way as well. Okay, so then there are also a lot of economic risks for summer forage production. The big one is insects. You know, you have fall armyworm and Bermudagrass stem maggot that you're thinking about. Another one that may or may not, you know, be on your mind this year is drought. So it's happened in the past, and there are a lot more economic risks, but we won't touch on all of them today. So here's another, you know, thought experiment to think about in terms of what you would lose if you had an insect infestation. So again, we have those 50 brood cows eating 20 pounds of forage a day, so our purchase feed cost is about $40 per day. So for each day that you can't feed your herd with pasture forage, you must spend roughly $40. If, say, fall armyworm comes in and cuts your ability to feed by 30 days, that's about $1,200 in additional feed costs, and those are going to be on top of everything that you've already invested into that pasture in terms of fertilizer and everything. So it's really important to be monitoring your pasture for pests if you can, you know, avoid something like that happening. So another way to think about this is that saving yourself one day without purchase feed will almost pay for your sweep net. So Kelly Palmer gave a webinar that was really great earlier in June about forage insects. And she stressed monitor is important. So this is a way to think about it is, you know, in terms of what you're saving, you could save, you know, $1,200 by making sure you're being on top of things with pest monitoring. Another way, the extension system puts out this fall armyworm watch map. This is from last year. So this is a really good tool for you to be using to see if there have been fall armyworms spotted in your area. You can also report it. So you can go to this link down there and monitor where fall armyworm are being spotted. The other one, Bermudagrass stem maggot. So this is mostly affecting hay producers because if cattle are grazing, they often get rid of the problem. So Bermudagrass stem maggot can severely decrease your hay yields, especially in poor growth conditions. So if you have poor soil quality. So really this problem is not going to go away, and you need to treat immediately upon detection. So I wanted to sort of throw this in here as well, where, you know, we're going to have probably higher incidence of detection of Bermudagrass stem maggot in some of these areas where there's a relatively large amount of hay production in Alabama. So in, you know, Northeast Alabama and the counties of DeKalb and Jackson, I mean, there's a large potential for damage from Bermudagrass stem maggot. So again, be monitoring. It can save you a lot of money in the long run to be on top of things. So we talked earlier about budgets and how they can help you plan for the future, and they can help with a lot of the what ifs, but not all of them, obviously. So what if we have a drought? And there is an insurance product that's being offered by USDA RMA, and that it hasn't been used too much here in Alabama yet. So I think about less than 1% of pasture land is being insured with this insurance product. So I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware that this product existed. And it's rainfall index insurance for pasture, rangeland, and forage. And this provides producers with insurance against drought-like conditions, which would affect forage production. So this covers perennial pasture, rangeland, or forage used to feed livestock. So this wouldn't cover any annual forage that you're using, just perennial. So since it's an index insurance product, it's not actually based on your direct production. So it's based on a grid in which your pasture land would be located. So the grids are about 12 by 12 miles. And so they use a weighted average of rainfall within that grid. And you're paid based on the rainfall that actually falls, in that grid, not on your direct forage production. So this can be used for haying or grazing land, and it can be used to guarantee from 70% to 90% of normal rainfall. So the way this policy works is there are 2-month intervals that you can choose from, ranging from January to December, and you pick the months in which you want to insure for rainfall. So if you think that your forage production most likely depends on, rainfall in March through June, you would, pick March, April intervals and May, June intervals. And that way, that if the rainfall fell below that 70% mark or 90%, whatever you've insured, then you would collect an indemnity from that. So here's an idea of what intervals are being selected here in Alabama. So these are the producers that participated in 2017. So the most popular ones were January, February, March, April, and September, October. And that didn't differ a whole lot between grazing or haying. So that just gives you an idea. But like I said, only about less than 1% of pasture land has been enrolled in this program. So it's definitely something for you to check out. This rainfall index insurance is purchased from any crop insurance agent. And so I've put a couple of resources right here if you want to find out some more information, because this was a very brief overview. But they have a lot of good resources on the website. The one that I really like is this decision support tool. So what you can do is actually go in, find the grid that your pasture land is located in, and look at historical rainfall indices to sort of give you an idea of, okay, out of the last 5 years, how many of those would I've collected an indemnity, and would I have came out ahead? And I will mention that this insurance has a pretty good subsidy on it, so it's less costly for producers than you might think. So you can find out all of that information with that decision support tool or at the USDA RMA website. So the sign-up deadline for the 2019 year is November 15th of 2018, and then that premium that you would pay for the insurance isn't actually due until September 1st of 2019, so you pay after. So as a take-home message, it's not just grass, it's forage is very important for your cattle operation. So it's important that we know and evaluate the forage programs on a regular basis. And it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So what works for your neighbor is maybe not going to be right for you. So, and it's also important to fertilize and monitor your pastures to maintain that future value going forward. So, and we highlighted a couple of risk management tools that are good to use when making business decisions. So those enterprise budgets partial budget analysis, and that new PRF insurance product from USDA. So check out those. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be happy to respond. And I did want to highlight again, the last Forage Month Webinar Series is going to be done by Josh Elmore on Thursday about grazing management. So make sure you tune in to that. Thank you.